This story begins in a dreadful prison in Siberia, where numerous German soldiers were imprisoned. After the end of World War II, Russia captured these soldiers and forced them into hard labor in lead mines. Although the security of this prison was not extremely tight, no one dared to escape. The reason was the endless sheet of snow spread all around, and the prison was located about 14,000 kilometers away from any human settlement. In such a situation, if any prisoner dared to escape, survival in the harsh Siberian cold was impossible. However, among those prisoners was one who wanted to break the chains of this prison and return to his wife and daughter. His name was Clemens Forel, who was sentenced to 25 years in this prison. But Clemens wanted to escape at any cost because he did not want to spend the rest of his life as a prisoner. Then one day, he got the opportunity. He hid in a coal-carrying freight train and escaped from the prison. When he saw the twinkling stars in the open sky for the first time outside the high walls of the prison, his joy knew no bounds. But his elation did not last long. After covering some distance, the train was stopped, and when Clemens peeked outside, he saw a Russian soldier standing in front of him with a gun. He was caught and, as punishment, was put in an open-air cell. 2 days later, the prison warden took him out and said, "Your comrades are eagerly waiting for you." But when Clemens met his comrades, there was no warmth in their welcome, only sticks and clubs ready. Because of Clemens, the prisoners had been kept hungry for 2 days, and they were furious. They attacked him and beat him so badly that he had to be admitted to the prison hospital. The doctor of this prison was also a German prisoner, who was amazed by Clemens' courage. Clemens told him, "I will try to escape again. Will you help me?" The doctor explained to him that escaping alive from this prison was almost impossible, and even if he somehow managed to escape, the freezing cold of Siberia would not let him survive. But the doctor revealed a bitter truth. If you stay here, your death is certain, because the mines you work in contain a high amount of lead, which is slowly entering your body and can cause deadly diseases like cancer. Therefore, the doctor advised him, you should make one last attempt to escape. Then he handed over all his warm clothes and shoes to Clemens and informed him that Russian soldiers often hide their food near railway lines. Not only that, he gave Clemens a gun so he could protect himself. In fact, the doctor himself wanted to escape from this prison, but a week ago, he found out that he had cancer and had only a month left to live. Now, he gave Clemens a lunchbox and with emotion said, "If you survive, deliver this lunchbox to my family and tell them that I am no longer in this world." In the dense darkness of the night, Clemens set out once again in search of his freedom, but this time, instead of taking the risk of hiding in a freight train, he decided to travel on foot. The next morning, when the warden received the news that Clemens had escaped from the prison, he immediately went to interrogate the doctor. But before he could reach there, the doctor had already taken his own life. After this incident, the warden sent several Russian soldiers in search of Clemens, but despite many days of searching, there was no trace of Clemens. Everyone began to think that he must have died in the bone-chilling cold. But the warden knew that Clemens was a very resilient person who would not give up so easily. That is why he ordered the search operation to continue. On the other hand, Clemens continued his journey battling snowstorms. After escaping from the prison, he suddenly heard the barking of dogs. Frightened, he looked back and saw a sled rapidly approaching him. He was about to run when the sled passed over him. Then his eyes opened. It was just a dream. In reality, Clemens had been walking continuously for the past 9 days, and now he had nothing left to eat or drink. Due to hunger and fatigue, it became difficult for him to move forward. But he did not give up and somehow dragged himself to continue his journey. A few days later, when his body also began to give up, he fainted and fell due to weakness. Several hours later, when he regained consciousness, he heard a strange sound around him. Then he saw a seal, and seeing this, a new spark appeared in his eyes. He immediately took out his gun and aimed with all his might, but the shot missed, and the seal began to run away. Clemens quickly chased it. As soon as the seal reached behind a rock and was about to jump into the water, Clemens fired his last shot. Fortunately, this time the aim was accurate. Seeing the seal fall, Clemens was overjoyed. After many days of hunger, he no longer had to worry about food. That day, he ate to his heart's content and after resting for a while, resumed his journey. Now, in this long journey, Clemens was completely alone, and all around him was an endless expanse of snow. In this desolate environment, his mental balance could be affected, so he kept talking to himself and maintained his morale with positive thoughts. Also, he checked his compass from time to time to avoid getting lost in this infinite snowy field. Days passed like this, and after walking continuously for 2 months, he saw a small tree in the distance. Seeing that sight, Clemens' joy knew no bounds. He jumped and ran to embrace the tree. This tree was a sign that Clemens had finally crossed the boundaries of the Arctic Circle. Meanwhile, on the other side, the warden was still engaged in the search for Clemens. He ordered his search team to continue their search within a radius of 500 kilometers. On the other hand, Clemens was moving forward through a dense forest when suddenly a snowstorm came. The storm was so terrifying that even giant trees began to uproot and fall. As Clemens tried to move forward, a huge tree began to fall on him. Fortunately, at the same time, 2 people named Semjon and Mattern, who were searching for gold in the forest, were present there. They saw Clemens and saved his life in time. After this, the 3 of them set out together, and after traveling for several days, came out of the snowy area. On the way, they found a river. To cross it, they made a small boat out of wood. While crossing the river, the three shared stories of their childhood. But then suddenly, the river's flow became strong, and their boat began to lose balance. In this chaos, Semjon lost his balance and fell straight into the water. Since he couldn't swim, he began to drift away. Seeing this, Clemens jumped into the river without wasting time and, after a tough struggle, brought Semjon to the shore. But on the other hand, Mattern left them both to die and moved ahead alone with the raft. A while later, Mattern reached a hut where he had previously stayed with Semjon. Driven by greed, he assumed Semjon was dead and planned to escape with his gold and other belongings. But shortly after, Clemens and Semjon also arrived there. Semjon was furious at Mattern's betrayal. In anger, he took out his gun and killed Mattern. After this, Clemens and Semjon packed their belongings and continued their journey. The two wandered for months, hoping to reach a human settlement. Meanwhile, winter returned, and the forests all around were covered with a white sheet of snow. Semjon had heavy luggage, making it difficult for him to walk in the snow. Seeing this, Clemens tried to lighten his load and said, "Let me carry your stuff for a while." But Semjon suspected that Clemens might also want to steal his gold. In this suspicion, he attacked Clemens, causing him to lose consciousness. A while later, when Clemens regained consciousness, he saw a pack of wolves approaching him. To save his life, he climbed a tree, but the ferocious wolves began to pull him down by his legs. Since the tree was very thin, it broke in the middle and fell. Now Clemens' death was certain, but then suddenly, the sound of gunfire echoed. When he opened his eyes, he saw that all the wolves were dead. In fact, hunters in the area had arrived just in time to save his life. They then took him to their village where he was treated. After years of hard work, Clemens finally reached a human settlement. Seeing so many people filled his heart with joy. He stayed in the village for several days, where everyone took good care of him. Some time later, a government notice arrived in the village, sent by the warden himself. It stated, "A German soldier has escaped from our prison, and if anyone harbors him, they will be declared a traitor." Given the circumstances, Clemens was forced to leave the village. But before leaving, the villagers gave him plenty of food and a hunting dog as a gift. Now, in this long journey, he had a companion, so he didn't feel lonely. After several days of travel, they saw a wooden mill. As soon as Clemens' dog saw the mill, it ran in search of food. To save it, Clemens also went inside the mill, but the workers there recognized him and took him to their boss. Clemens told his entire story there. Hearing this, everyone's hearts were filled with sympathy for him. They fed him and then put him on a train going to Germany. Clemens was very happy with the thought that he would soon reach home. But he had no idea that the mill owner had informed the warden about him, and now the warden was waiting for him at the station with his soldiers. However, before reaching the station, Clemens saw the soldiers. At the first opportunity, he jumped off the train and ran away, but unfortunately, the Russian soldiers saw him and started chasing him. Clemens hurriedly crossed the railway track, but then suddenly the warden stood in front of him. Seeing this, his heart sank because his years of hard work now seemed to be in vain. The warden was about to catch him when Clemens' loyal dog pounced on him and bit him. This unexpected attack gave Clemens a chance to escape. He ran with all his might. But then, a shot was fired. When he looked back, he found his dog lying on the ground, lifeless. Seeing this scene, Clemens' heart sank, but he held back his tears. He didn't stop and kept moving forward with all his strength. After this, he climbed onto a bridge and jumped onto a passing train below, escaping once again from the warden's grasp. Days passed, and Clemens continued to move forward on this journey. Before he knew it, the year 1952 had arrived, and it had been 7 years since he escaped from prison. At this time, he was in Central Asia, wandering around a village fair. In this fair, he saw various food items, but with empty pockets, he moved on with a heavy heart. Then he noticed two girls selling pancakes. Clemens' hunger drew him towards the pancakes, but he didn't have a single penny. Disheartened, he decided to leave, but then one of the girls took pity on him. She broke off a piece of pancake and gave it to Clemens. At first, Clemens found it a bit strange, but then he ate the pancake. Meanwhile, a juice vendor in the fair also noticed this. After this, Clemens went to a church, and the vendor followed him there. In fact, the vendor had also been a prisoner of war once, so he decided to help Clemens instead of handing him over to the police. He took Clemens to his home where, after years, Clemens shaved and returned to his old appearance. After this, the vendor gave him a new passport so he could cross the Russian border and reach Germany. Before parting, Clemens thanked him wholeheartedly and set out towards the Russia-Germany border. A few weeks later, Clemens reached the Russian border and showed his passport to the Russian soldier stationed there. He was afraid that the soldier might recognize him or that his passport might prove to be fake, but fortunately, nothing of the sort happened, and the soldier allowed him to cross the border. Seeing this, Clemens' joy knew no bounds, and he couldn't stop himself from laughing. Finally, he reached the top of the bridge, and crossing it would mean entering his country, Germany. But then, just as he reached halfway, a bright light shone in his eyes. He opened his eyes to see the warden standing in front of him. Panicked, he looked back and realized he was still on Russian soil. This meant the warden had every right to arrest him. This realization broke Clemens' heart because his years of hard work now seemed to be going to waste. But then something unexpected happened, something even Clemens didn't anticipate. The warden stepped aside and allowed him to move forward. At first, Clemens couldn't believe it, but then he gathered courage and moved ahead. In fact, the warden was so impressed by his resilience and courage that he let him return to his homeland instead of arresting him. Finally, Clemens crossed the border and set foot in his country, Germany. After reaching there, he went straight to his home, where he sought his daughter and wife. A little later, when the two of them left for church, Clemens followed them to the church. Inside the church, his daughter saw him, and she ran to embrace her father. Seeing her husband alive after years, his wife's joy knew no bounds. Ultimately, the three of them hugged each other, and with this memorable film reached its emotional conclusion.